Hey, what's going on, SAT fam? Hope you guys are having a fantastic day. So listen, one of you guys asked in the comment sections for help with apostrophes. And so that's what I'm about to do. I'm going to give you guys a master class on apostrophes specifically for the digital SAT. So as long as you guys listens to this video lesson with attentiveness, with attention and care, I promise you guys, you will get better with this stuff. It'll help you guys out in some way to answer questions more successfully and confidently on the test. That is an absolute guarantee. Don't want to waste. Hey, if you guys don't believe me, totally okay. You don't have to watch this. But if you guys just stick with me throughout this video and just really listen with an open mind and an open heart, I promise you guys, you will get something valuable from this lesson, especially if you are confused or just unsure how to use apostrophes or have trouble with apostrophe questions for the SAT. So if you feel like you're kind of guessing when you're answering apostrophe questions for the SAT, like this video is going to teach you guys everything you need to know, and it's going to give you guys a certainty, right, that you need, that feeling that you know you're getting this question correct when you're answering apostrophe questions on the test. Okay, so a couple of things to kind of mention, to kind of apologize for. I'm actually going to apologize for this stuff ahead of time. So one of the things you guys I have to say sorry for is the quality of the speech or the video production isn't going to be as smooth. If you guys have seen some of my previous videos, you guys understand that I don't have anything scripted, right? I don't have time to make it scripted. I'm currently a PhD student, and so a lot of my time is dedicated to that. And that's a huge workload. So I don't have time to write out scripts, word for word. And so I do have a general structure or general format, but I don't have anything kind of written down, right, beyond that. And so I'm going to be kind of creating the lesson as I record. So my speech isn't going to be as fluid. You're going to hear me kind of stammer, say ahs throughout the video. So please just be patient with me and just try to treat this like it's a normal classroom. Like when your teachers are giving you lessons in class, they don't speak perfectly, right? You guys understand that, And so just treat this as like a live lesson because it's really what it is. So if you have that mindset and don't get all caught up in, oh, he's making so many mistakes and this isn't such a well-produced video, that's not important. Guys, the important thing, right, for you is the content. So the message that you hear, if you're listening to my message or the words that I'm saying, there's no choice but for you guys to get better. And that's it, and so focus on the message. But I apologize for the ums and the ahs. Secondly is I'm going to apologize for the handwriting. I don't have the nicest handwriting in the world, and I'm okay with that. I've made peace with it. But again, if you can look beyond or get beyond that distraction of my hand and not focus on my handwriting, but really focus on the message that I'm sharing with you guys. Because my intention is to help you guys get better with this stuff, is to give you guys more confidence, to help you guys to become more confident test takers when you're taking the SAT. Ultimately, my goal is to help over a million students throughout the world get fewer than 5 wrong on the SAT. That's something that I'm committed to doing over the next 3 years. And so in order to do that, I have to get this stuff out. I just have to start helping you guys out now. On the back end, I'm creating courses. I have a book released, or it's going to be released in a couple of days, a test prep book in Korea. And I also have extra courses as well as like practice tests that I'm going to start to create and give out to you guys sometime in the future. But for now, the best thing that I can do is to record these lessons live in real time and just for you guys to have to deal with my handwriting. So I am sorry ahead of time though, okay? So again, just focus on the message and just please excuse the handwriting, okay? So if you guys are ready, why don't we jump into this? So the first section that we're going to focus on is the usage of apostrophes. So how are apostrophes used? So the first thing that we have to know about this is the definition, right? You can kind of think about this as like the meaning of apostrophes. Like, what does it mean when you see when you see a word with an apostrophe? Okay, so apostrophes can really have 2 different meanings or 2 different uses. The first use is it can be used to show possession. The second use is that it can be used as a contraction. So what is a possession? What is possession? Possession is basically when something possesses or owns something else, right? So when something belongs to someone, or when someone, right, owns or possesses something. It doesn't always have to be a someone. It can be a something owning something, but just understand that there's a relationship between sort of two nouns. Okay, so let me give you guys a couple of examples to make this point clear. So the first is, if I say Jack's car, right? In this case, the possessive or the apostrophe with Jack's car is being used to show possession, right? This is being used to express the meaning that, hey, this car belongs to Jack. It is Jack's car, right? So Jack is the one who possesses the car. Okay, but like I said, it doesn't always have to be a person possessing something. It could be something possessing something else, right? So for example, if I said something like the book's cover, so in this case, right, the apostrophe with books is being used to show possession, right? It's being used to express that the cover belongs to the book. It is the book's cover. Okay, so that's going to be the first use to show possession. The second use is as a contraction. So what exactly is a contraction? So a contraction is nothing more than just a shortened form of two words. In other words, a contraction is just one word, right? That it sounds like one word, but it actually has two words inside of it. Okay, and one of those words is a verb. So for example, if I have the sentence, Jack's at his house, this is actually grammatically correct, right? In this case, the apostrophe with Jack is no longer being used to show possession, because what does he possess? Jack's at? Does he possess his at? Does the at belong to Jack? No, right? Doesn't make any sense. So in this case, it's being used as a contraction. So like I said, a contraction is just a shortened form of two words where the second word is always a verb. So Jack apostrophe S can either mean Jack is, or it can mean Jack has. Just depends on the sentence that you're given. So in this case, which one makes more sense? It probably makes more sense to say Jack is at his house. Okay? And so again, two basic usages of apostrophes, right? To show possession and as a contraction. Now, there are two types of words that apostrophes can be used with. So you're going to see both of these types on the SAT. So apostrophes can be used with nouns, and they can also be used with pronouns. Now, nouns are basically just more specific versions of pronouns, right? Pronouns are just more general words that replace nouns. A noun is a person, place, thing, an event, or like an idea, right? And a pronoun is just a more general word, right, that refers to that noun. So let me explain. Let me give you guys some examples. So examples of nouns would be, like I said, the book, right? The book could be like the boy, or it could be more specific, like a person's name, like Jack, right? It could even be plural, right? These three examples are singular nouns. It could even be plural, right? So we could say the boys, right? To mention that it's more than one boy, or like books. We make plural nouns by just adding an S to it, right? Now, what about pronouns? So pronouns, like I said, are just general words that replace nouns. So the pronoun it is a general word that replaces the noun book, right? So if I say, oh, the book is on my bed, right? It is a good book. Right? So it is referring to the book. If I say the boy, the pronoun version would be he. Or I could have different forms of the pronouns, right? Like him or his. Yeah. And Jack could be, again, he. And then the boys could be like they or them. Okay, so the point here is, you guys, the apostrophes are going to be used with these two types of words, right? With nouns and with pronouns. Now, this is what you have to know. This is extremely important, so pay very close attention to what I'm about to tell you guys. When apostrophes are used with nouns, even though they can be used to show possession and as a contraction, on the SAT, when you see apostrophes with nouns, this is going to be always used as the possessive form. It's always going to be used to show possession. Okay, at least every single question up to this point, whenever I've seen a noun appear on the SAT with an apostrophe, it's always been used to show possession. It's never been used to show contraction. So just think about that. Nouns, right, with possession, nouns in possessive form, okay? Now, on the other hand, when you have apostrophes with a pronoun on the SAT, or just in general, you want to think about apostrophes with pronouns always as a contraction. So, for example, if I say it apostrophe s, we see the apostrophe with the pronoun. Think about this as a contraction. Think about this as meaning it is or it has. So the way that I like to think about it is when I think, okay, pronouns and contractions, contractions verb, contractions verb. That's going to be a really helpful way for you guys to think. Yeah. So it is or it has, right? If I say they apostrophe re, there, right? With the apostrophe with the pronoun, this is used as a contraction, right? You would say it would mean they are, right? They are always has a verb. So this is the first thing that you want to know, right, about apostrophes on the SAT is think when you have apostrophes with nouns, think possession, possessive form. And when you think pronouns and apostrophes, when you see pronouns with apostrophes, think contraction, okay? Verb, contractions, verb, right? So this is how you guys are going to learn, right? This is how I'm going to teach you guys. So that's going to be the first and foremost an important thing to kind of know, okay? Now, the second section that we're going to talk about, we're going to jump into with apostrophes is the form. So in other words, like how are apostrophes or how are these words written, right? So in order to understand words with apostrophes, we have to kind of separate these into two different categories, right? So we have to talk about the singular. Oh, by the way, first of all, we're just going to talk about or focus on apostrophes with nouns. Okay, we'll talk about apostrophes with pronouns in just a second. But in this part of the video, we're just focusing on nouns that have apostrophes, right? Nouns with apostrophes, okay? So in order to figure out or understand, right, the form, right, of these nouns and apostrophes, we have to understand the singular possessive form and the plural possessive form. Let me give you guys a couple of examples. So if I say, actually, let me stop right there. So we have the singular possessive and the plural possessive. Okay, so for those of you guys who don't know, singular possessive just means it refers to one, right? So singular is one and plural refers to more than one. Plural is many. So when we have a plural possessive, right, it's referring to more than one noun. But if we have a singular possessive, it's just referring to one noun. Okay? We got that locked in? Good. So the next thing then is we also have to think about regular and also irregular nouns. So we're going to create this little matrix. Okay? So what are regular nouns? Regular nouns are they're just nouns that kind of just behave normally, right? They follow normal grammar rules. On the other hand, irregular nouns, right, don't behave very well, right? They're kind of the bad kids. They don't follow the rules of grammar. And there isn't a way to memorize these because there's too many of them, but you guys are familiar with regular and irregular nouns. I'll show you guys exactly why you're familiar with them in just a second. So how do we form, right, a singular possessive noun, right? How do we form a singular possessive noun with a regular noun? So a regular noun, so what we do is, the first step is we ask ourselves, what is the singular noun form? So if we just take like any noun, like think about book, right? Book. What's the singular noun form? Like how do you write the singular? You just say book, right? That's the first step. The second step is simply, right, to add the apostrophe S. So when we say book apostrophe S, when we see that, we should understand that to mean, right, that one, this is possessive, right? So the book's cover, So it's the possessive form, because remember, when you're being tested on nouns, right, and apostrophes on the SAT, it's always used to show possession, right? So that's one thing. It's the possessive form. And secondly, it's the singular possessive form. In other words, we're just referring to one book, right? Not several books, but just one. So it's this cover belongs to one book, right? You guys can get it, right? Cool. And so that's how to form the singular possessive form for regular nouns. Now, this is also true even if you have a noun that ends in an S. So the noun bus ends in an S. So this is how to write the singular noun form for bus, right? So what do we do next is we add the apostrophe S, right? So buses, right? So the bus's wheels. So again, what do we know? What can we understand when we see this? We understand one, this is possessive form. In other words, the wheels belong to the bus, right? And two, this is a singular noun form. This is referring to more than one bus, okay? So that's going to be the rules or the steps to how to create or how to write, right? Apostrophes and nouns for singular regular nouns. What about for regular nouns, right? What's the plural possessive form for regular nouns? So what we do is first of all, we write the plural noun of books. What's the plural noun of book? It's going to be books. So first of all, create the plural noun, right? Books with the S. And then the second step is simply to add the apostrophe, right? So we have now books with the apostrophe after the S. The first example, we had books with the apostrophe before the S. Okay, so now we can start to see a difference, even though they both sound the same. And I think that's the biggest reason that students have trouble with apostrophes is because they sound the same, right? When you say books and books, you're like, oh, well, then sounds exactly the same. So what's the difference, right? Well, the difference is how it's formed or how it's written. So now when you say books, covers, so now what does this mean? Right now, this means that, well, we know two things. One, it's possessive form because it's used with the noun, right? Books. And then now we also know that the covers refers or belongs to these books, right? So it is the book's covers showing possession. And then also, secondly, we know that this is referring to more than one book. It's plural, right? So when we see the apostrophe after the S, right, we know it's referring to the plural form, okay? So this is where you're going to start to see the SAT kind of try to trick you a little bit. Is one of the ways they can try to trick you and trap you with apostrophes is they can create an illogical meaning, right? So if we say the books with the apostrophe after the S cover, right, the books cover, this doesn't make logical sense. Well, why not? Right? Because more than one book, right, has to have more than one cover, right? So 5 books cannot just have one cover, right? Each book has to have its own cover, right? So this is where logically it makes no sense, right? So this is why you would have to say books covers in order for this to be correct. Okay, so you have to make sure that the nouns kind of agree with each other or make logical sense, right? When they're placed next to each other like this. Okay, so now what about the plural form for regular nouns, right? So that for regular nouns that end in S. So we do the same thing basically. It's what's the plural of bus? That's going to be buses, right? B-U-S-E-S. And then from there, the next step is to add the apostrophe after the S. So now if we say the bus's wheels, again, we know that this is showing possession. The wheels belong to the bus, right? And also, it's referring to more than one bus. Okay? Cool. Now, let's move on to irregular nouns. So irregular nouns in the singular form don't look any different from regular nouns, right? It's only when you try to turn them into plural nouns, right, that they're kind of written, weirdly. Okay, so an example of an irregular noun would be if I said person. So if I say the person's mother, the person's mom, So again, this is referring to the possessive form, right? The mom kind of belongs to the person, right? It's the person's mom, kind of showing that relationship, right, with each other. Okay. We also know that persons with the apostrophe S is singular. So we know it's referring to just one person. Okay. But now this is where it gets a little bit tricky. So guys, tell me, what is the plural form of person? So how do you write person in the plural form? You would say people, right? So you don't say persons, you say people. So now when you create the plural form, right, then here you just add the apostrophe S, right? So notice how this is different from the previous example, because when we form the plural noun for regular nouns like book, books, right, we add the S at the end of the noun to create the plural noun. But with irregular nouns, it doesn't work like that. We don't just simply add the S at the end of the noun to make it plural, right? We have to change the word itself, right? So plural of person is people. And so now here then, you just add the apostrophe and the S. So if I say people's cars, right, then it shows that these cars belongs to more than one person, right? Maybe 5 people, 10 people, it doesn't matter. So that's, another example of an irregular noun would be like, what about child, right? So child, apostrophe S, right? Child's to show possession. What's the plural form? It'd be children's, right? Children, apostrophe S, right? So that's going to be, you guys, another thing you have to know, because when you're tested on apostrophes on the SAT, you're going to have to recognize or understand whether it's singular possessive or plural possessive, right? And that's going to be important. You're going to have to choose, right, whether the singular or the plural possessive makes more sense. Okay, good. So hopefully you guys are kind of following along pretty well. So now, the next thing that I want to just kind of share with you before we jump into practice questions. So we have 4 practice questions from the actual SAT and from the books that I wrote, the practice questions that I created. That'll work through apostrophe questions I'll show you how to work through apostrophe questions step by step. But before we get into that, there are a couple of other things that I want you guys to be aware of with apostrophes. And maybe to save a little bit of time here, maybe we'll talk about these things as we work through apostrophe questions with nouns. And then we'll kind of jump into apostrophe questions with pronouns in just a second, right after we cover these 2 questions. So notice in your answer choices, right, we have apostrophe. We know that we're being tested on apostrophes, right? We have apostrophes in different places. Apostrophes with the word bird, right? Some of them won't have apostrophes, right? Apostrophes will be like either before the S or after the S, right? We even have an apostrophe after instinct, right? With another word. And so your job is just basically to figure out, right, which one is going to be, what's going to be the correct form. Okay. So let's read the passage together first. Yeah. I'll share with you guys exactly step by step kind of how I work through these questions. So first of all, I notice before I read the passage, I take a look at the answer choices and I know that I'm being tested on apostrophes, right? That's just one. Next thing is when I read the passage. Okay, and I'm just trying to read it to understand basically what's happening in the passage, right? Like what the passage is talking about, and nothing more than that. That's where my mind is focused at. So the passage says, pigeons, often regarded as mere city dwellers, possess remarkable navigational abilities that have long intrigued scientists. The birds' homing instincts allow them to return to their nests over vast distances, with studies suggesting that they utilize the Earth's magnetic fields with the sun's position and even the landscape's features as guides. Okay, so now this is how you solve apostrophe questions, you guys, right? This is how the 99th percentile, the top 1% solves apostrophe questions on the SAT. So the first step or the first general principle, you guys, is this. Focus on one thing at a time, right? So in other words, don't focus on the entire answer choice of the entire statement all at once. Break it up into parts, right? So maybe here I can focus on, first of all, like the birds, you want to focus on kind of one concept at a time, right? Focus on one concept at a time, okay? If you try to handle too many things at once, that's when you start to get confused and that's when you start to make mistakes. Okay, so what does this look like in practice? Well, the first thing that I'm going to look at, you guys, is the section, the birds, right? But notice how answer choice A here is written in the plural noun as a plural noun without the apostrophe. And answer choice B here is written as the plural possessive. Okay? That's going to be one common thing that you want to look for, right? That's one concept that you want to check for. It's going to be whether or not the plural noun form is correct or whether or not the possessive form is correct. Okay, whether you're choosing a plural noun or a possessive noun. So this is how you kind of work through this. Okay, if you have two nouns next to each other, like you see here, right? Like the bird's homing instincts. Right? We have these two nouns next to each other, right? Because this first noun is not going to be plural. Okay? It's never going to be plural on the SAT. So when you see these two nouns next to each other, and it's okay to have like an adjective in between, right? The nouns. But when you say like the bird's homing instincts, if I said, Jack's yellow car, it still counts as two nouns next to each other, right? If I have like a verb in between the two nouns, it doesn't count. If I say, Jack's, or the boys are at the library. Right? If I have a verb between the two nouns, boys and the library, doesn't count. Right? It's only when you have these two nouns next to each other like this, right? And again, it's okay to have like adjectives or like descriptive words in between these two nouns. You also can't have like prepositions as well. So you can't say the books in my house, right? In is a preposition. That doesn't count, right? If you said the book's house, right? That would count because that's two nouns next to each other. Does that make sense? Hopefully it does. So if you ever see these two nouns next to each other like this, right? And you kind of understand, it kind of has this sense of, it has this sort of relationship with each other, right? Like possession, the bird's instincts, right? It's the instincts that belongs to the birds. It's their instincts, right? So if you kind of notice that, then you guys, right? You know that this first noun, like I said, can never be the plural noun form. So because it can't be the plural noun form, we can cross out answer choice B, just because of that. Okay, so now we're getting there. Okay, the second thing that I want you guys to look at, right, is we can do the same thing now with instincts and instincts. Right, so again, notice how answer choices A, C, and D are written. You write the words instincts in the plural noun form, while answer choice B writes the word instincts as a possessive form. So which one's correct, right? So if we got to look at the passage here now, notice how it says the instincts allow, right? Do we have two nouns next to each other? No, right? We have a verb, right? The instincts allow them. So when we have this verb, right, not a noun that comes after the noun instincts, then again, then here we don't use the possessive form, right? We cannot use the apostrophe. Now, why? Right? Because logically, an apostrophe again shows possession. These instincts have to possess something else, right? But what do the instincts possess? Right? It's not clear. It's not written in the sentence, right? So the instincts what, right? The instincts what is what you can ask, right? There is no noun that comes after instincts with the apostrophe. So you know this can't be the correct answer, okay? So we can eliminate answer choice B, right? Because it incorrectly uses that apostrophe. Good. So now we're down to the remaining two answer choices, okay? So now this is going to be the other thing that the SAT will test you on with apostrophes, whether or not you use the singular or the plural possessive. So this is why it was important that you learned how to write it, right? Because you have to be able to recognize it, So if you look at answer choice C, is this the singular possessive or the plural possessive? Hopefully all of you guys are saying it's singular possessive. Why? Because the apostrophe comes before the S. So when we have the apostrophe S, this is singular. So what does that mean? That means that this just refers to one bird, right? It's one bird's homing instincts, right? And choice D, though, when we have birds with the apostrophe after the S, right, this means this is referring to the plural possessive, right? This is referring to in the plural sense many birds. So not just one bird anymore, but we're dealing with several birds, right? A lot of birds. And so so now this is the question is how do you figure out, right, whether the birds should be singular or should be plural? Well, this is where you have to check context. So on the SAT, you guys, context is king, okay? Context just means the surrounding information. So you have to refer back to the passage to look for what I call context clues. Every single question on the SAT can be answered correctly by identifying the correct context clues in the passage. So it's absolutely critical that you understand or that you know which context clues you're looking for, right, when you're solving a particular question. So for apostrophes, the context clues that you're looking for, well, you're looking for, I'm going to say there's several things, right? But one of the things that you're looking for is you're looking for other nouns. So what I mean is you're looking for other nouns that refers to the birds, right? So you're trying to see if these other nouns are using the birds in a plural sense or in a singular sense, right? So if you look at the passage here, you guys, yeah, it says pigeons. Notice how pigeons here is written in the plural form, right? Also notice how, here it says the birds' homing instincts allow them to return to their nests, right? Suggesting that they utilize. So these are the other sort of nouns, or the other references to birds, right? That's what I mean by these other nouns, right? You're looking for these other references, right, to the noun birds. So that's because if you know that the passage writes the noun in the plural form, like pigeons, then you have to stay with that same form, right? So here we cannot use the singular possessive form because we're referring to these birds in the plural sense. So this is why we can cross out answer choice C, and this is why D here will be the correct answers to this question. Does that make sense? So this is how you solve apostrophe questions kind of step by step. This is what I mean by focus on one thing at a time. Okay, hopefully that's clear to you guys. Let's move on. Let's try another apostrophe question with nouns. So notice again in the answer choices, right? You know very quickly when you're being tested on apostrophes. You'll see apostrophes in different places, right? In the answer choices. Okay. So now let's take a read through the passage. If you guys want to try this on your own, please pause the video and come back in a little bit after you're done. Okay, cool. So the passage reads, fireflies' glowing tails, a mesmerizing display in summer, are a form of bioluminescence. We can just stop there for now, just to save a little bit of time. So first of all, notice how we have these kind of relationship between these two nouns, the fireflies' tails. Of course, we can have the adjective glowing, but just notice how there's two nouns next to each other, right? So when you see these two nouns next to each other like this, it kind of seems like it has a relationship. They have a relationship with each other. Then again, you know that this first noun cannot be a plural noun, right? It has to have an apostrophe. Okay, now your job is to figure out, right, where the apostrophe should go, whether you should put the apostrophe before the S or after the S, right? But you know that a fireflies has to be written as a possessive, in the possessive form. So this means that we can cross out answer choice A. What else can we cross out? We can cross out answer choice D, right? Because it's the same thing. We need an apostrophe here. It's firefly tails again. It kind of sounds weird, anyways. But here, it's for that reason, right? Have these relationships between the two nouns. That this noun has to be in the possessive form. So we can cross out D as well. Nextly is answer choice B. Answer choice B, we notice the apostrophe after the S, which tells us that this is the plural possessive. And then answer choice C has the apostrophe before the S, which means that this is singular possessive, right? So we have to decide, is the singular form better or is the plural form better, right? And again, in order to do that, we have to look for context clues, right? So we talked about one context clue in the previous question, looking for other references to fireflies, right? So where else do they talk about fireflies in the passage? Do they talk about fireflies at all in the passage? Here we know that we do, right? We know that fireflies is written in the plural sense, right? So in the plural. And so we know that B is going to be correct, right? But there's one more sort of context clue that I want you guys to be aware of, because the SAT does test you on this, and it's tricky to a lot of students, especially international students who aren't familiar with English as well as native speakers are. So the second context clue that I want you guys to be aware of is the articles. So articles are words like un, and the. Right, so these are called articles. Now, this is the grammar rule that you guys should just know. I can teach you guys the grammar behind it, but you don't need to know exactly why, although I can kind of share with you. As long as you know that this is the case, that should be enough for you, okay? Because here's the rule. If you have a singular possessive, like answer choice C, right, where the apostrophe comes before the S, if you have a singular possessive form, you have to have an article before it, okay? So you have to have like an article before the singular possessive. If there is no article before a singular possessive, it's not grammatically correct, right? And I'm tempted to explain the grammar rule why, but hopefully you guys just trust me on that. It's a nice little shortcut, or it's something you can kind of check for. Because notice in the passage, you guys, there is no article. There's no or un or the before the possessive fireflies, right? So you know for sure that the singular possessive is going to be wrong, 100%. Okay, now on the other hand, what if the passage had the singular article, or what if the passage had the article before the possessive? Then here, 1,000% it always has to be the singular possessive form, right? Why? Because whenever you use the articles or un, you're referring to the singular. You're referring to a singular, right? You can't say and then have a plural noun. You can't say books, right? Boys, girls, no, right? You have to say either just books or the books would be okay, right? So if you ever do see the article or un before the possessive, then you know the possessive always has to be singular. Another little cool grammar rule to know, okay? What about the article the? Well, the article the is tricky. It can be both, right? It can be both singular or plural. Because if I said the boy, right, or if I said the boys, both of them would be grammatically correct, right? So in that case, right, you have to look at the context, the other context clues, right? The other references to are they just talking about, is the passage just talking about one boy or many boys, right? In the passage to look to determine which answer is correct, okay? But anyways, yeah, so here so that's going to be really helpful as a context clue as well. So we know that C would be incorrect. This is why B would be the correct answer for this question, okay? So good, that's pretty much what you need to know for apostrophes and nouns. Now let's jump into apostrophes and pronouns. So we can do that simply by just looking at, before we jump into this question, we can do that on this page. So with pronouns, you guys, whenever pronouns have apostrophes, so notice how we have it apostrophe s, right? Whenever pronouns have apostrophes, you always want to think about these as contractions. It's just helpful to think about it like that on the SAT. There's one pronoun where if you have an apostrophe with that pronoun, it's not a contraction, it can be possessive, but the SAT does not test you on that, so you don't have to worry about it, right? So, but just the thing is, whenever you see an apostrophe with a pronoun, think contractions. What are contractions again? Oh, they have a verb in it, right? So it apostrophe s means what? It means it is or it has, right? Depending on the context of the sentence, right? So now what you can do here is one of the ways that the SAT is going to test you on apostrophes and pronouns is whether you use contractions or possessive form. Okay, so when we say it apostrophe s, this is the contraction form of the word it's. When we say it's without the apostrophe, this is going to be the possessive form. Same thing with C, you guys. T-H-E-I-R. What is this one? This is going to be the possessive form. And then what is the... I think that's how to spell possessive, right? Anyways, doesn't really matter. I don't really care. What's the contraction of there? It's going to be T-H-E-Y-R apostrophe R-E. T-H-E-Y apostrophe R-E. I think I said that. T-H-E-Y apostrophe R-E. There, right? Apostrophe R-E. So this is going to be the contraction, and this is going to mean they are. So there's a really cool tip, a cool shortcut I can teach you guys to determine without a doubt which one's correct. So what I want you guys to do is this is how you can test it out. Okay. I want you guys to plug in the contraction into the passage, but when you read the sentence, I want you guys to read it with the verb. Don't just read it like it's, because if you read it like it's, it sounds exactly like be, right? It's. Can't tell the difference. You can't hear the difference. But if you read it like it is or it has, you'll be able to tell whether it makes sense in the sentence. Okay, so if you read the passage, it says, the painting, a vivid portrayal of the Dutch countryside, is renowned for its use of light. Van Gogh's brushwork with it is thick strokes. Van Gogh's brushwork with it has thick expressive strokes. You'd be like, what? That sounds absolutely ridiculous, right? And you would be absolutely right. It makes no, you can hear whether contractions are used correctly or not if you just read it with the verb in it, right? And that can be a clear-cut way, you guys, to help you to figure out that, hey, answer choice A here is not going to be correct, okay? Now, the second tip that I can give you guys is whenever you see ITS with the apostrophe after the S, just cross this out immediately. This doesn't exist in the English language, does not exist. Right? So it's always going to be wrong, right, in every single case. But the SAT likes to put that in there, again, because sometimes students will get confused. They think it's like plural possessive, right? But it's not. It doesn't exist. Okay, so we can cross out D immediately as well. So the next thing they're going to test you on, again, just like with apostrophes and nouns, is do we use singular or plural, right? Because now S choices B and D, they're both showing possessive. They're both showing possession. These are both the possessive form. The only difference is that answer choice B is the singular possessive and answer choice C is the plural possessive. Right? So then now, how do you determine, right, whether it's singular or plural? Well, then solving if you guys have watched my video on pronouns, you guys know how I solve pronoun questions, right? It's the exact same way here when we have possessive pronouns too. Whenever you're trying to determine the difference between a singular and a plural pronoun, you can always do the strategy or the technique that I use. If you guys haven't seen my video on pronouns, you guys can go ahead and watch that. It's really helpful. I walk you guys exactly step by step how to do it. You guys can, jump into the video library and kind of check that out. But I'll give you guys a quick peek here. So the sentence is Van Gogh's brushwork with its thick expressive strokes. Whose strokes are we talking about? Right? Whose strokes are we referring to? Right? So this is what you have to find. Well, logically, the answer to that question, based off of what the passage says, is it is Van Gogh's brushwork. So it's going to be Van Gogh's or the brushwork strokes, right? So Van Gogh's strokes or the brushworks, right? That's going to be the noun that this pronoun refers to, right? And notice how, right? It's the brushwork, right? Is singular, right? So because the brushwork is singular, we want to use a singular pronoun, right? Not the plural pronoun. So we can cross out C because it should be singular, not plural possessive. And so this is why B would be the correct answer for this question. Okay. just kind of working through these step by step, but this is how you're going to be tested on pronouns and apostrophes on the SAT. So let's try one more, you guys, before we wrap up. So taking a look at the answer choices, right? We know we're being tested on pronouns, but specifically, one of the things we're being tested on is apostrophes. So whenever we have the apostrophe with the pronoun, again, just think contraction, right? With the verb. That's how I want you guys to think about this. Okay, so we can test this out, right? So should we use the contraction form, or should we use the possessive form? And so the way that you figure this out is plug the contraction into the sentence, but read it with the verb, right? So if you say jazz music, which emerged in the early 20th century, is often celebrated for it is improvisational style. Or if you say jazz music is often celebrated for it has improvisational style, you'd be like, what? That makes no sense at all, right? And the reason why it makes no sense grammatically is because we already have a verb, right? Jazz music is celebrated. So then would you say is celebrated for it is or it has style? No way, right? So this is why the contraction would be absolutely incorrect, right? So we can cross out B and D here. Now, nextly, should the pronoun be singular or plural? Right? We know that THEIR is the plural possessive and its ITS is the singular possessive, right? So how do we figure that out? Well, we just read the passage and try to understand, right, what noun this pronoun refers to, right? So whose improvisational style are we talking about, right? So the logical answer to that question is going to be jazz music, right? It's jazz music style. So the way that you figure this out, you guys just read the sentence, but you want to read to just understand the context, right? And then you can ask yourself, in this case, you ask yourself, what noun is this pronoun referring to? The way that I like to ask it is by asking, whose style are we talking about, right? Based, again, and then the answer to that question is going to be given in the passage, right? This is the context clue that you want to use to solve this type of grammar question, right? So here, jazz music, is that a singular or a plural noun? Well, jazz music is a singular noun, right? Because we don't have an S after music, right? It's just jazz music. So because it's a singular noun, what's the correct answer? Well, we know it's got to be C, right? The singular possessive. We can cross out A because that's the plural possessive form. And that'll be it, you guys, right? So just to kind of recap what we covered. So we covered a couple of things. We covered a lot of things, right? So we talked about apostrophes and how they're used on the SAT. Remember that apostrophes can be used to show possession and as a contraction. When apostrophes are used with nouns, right, they're used to show possession. When apostrophes are used with pronouns, they're used as contractions. What are contractions? Contractions are words that have verbs in them, right? So it apostrophe S means it is or it has. Now remember on the SAT, whenever you see an apostrophe with a noun, it's always going to be used. Well, I think I just mentioned that, right? It's always going to be used as the possessive form, right? And the apostrophe with the pronoun is going to be used as the contraction form. And then you're just kind of working through kind of step by step, right? Each question. And you guys shouldn't have any problems with these, right? So hopefully you guys learned a few things here in this lesson. If you guys haven't already, please like the video, comment in the comment box below one thing that you found was helpful for you. Also, let me know something that you want to learn, something new that you want to learn. And please subscribe to the channel. And until next time, you guys, always stay curious. You never stop learning. You know, you guys got this. I'll see you next time. Take care.